My name is Cyril War.
And my name is Bryan Roig. Welcome to the Shaping Spirit podcast. We're just a couple of California guys who have collected a bunch of academic degrees, studying spirituality all over the world, bringing it right back here to you in the format of the one and only non-sectarian spirituality-based podcast in the world. And Cyril, what is our topic for today?
Overcoming the fear of death.
I love that. That's something that we could literally talk about for years and years to come and probably not even scratch the surface. Yeah. Always uncovering new meanings and realizations. So this is a fun topic, and we'll probably revisit this God knows how many times. But yeah, I mean, where do we start with that? What do you think?
My suggestion is that we begin on the premise of the very logo of the very, modus operandi of our own podcast, our main slogan, which we repeat every time, which is, remember, you're not your body, you're a spiritual being. Remember, you are not matter, but you matter. So can we expand, can we start on the premise that we are, at least accept just theoretically, and then run with it, the idea that we're not black or white or Jewish or Christian or Republican or Democrat or woke or conservative or straight or gay or whatever, anything that pertains to this physical body, we are not. We are beyond that. We are spiritual beings. That's our real identity. And that identity survives physical death, survives the death of the physical body. Can we start from that?
I like that. I definitely think we can start with that. And I think, the basic premise of growing on a spiritual path, the first, kind of method that you have to accept is that you're not your body. I remember years and years ago, there was a very well-known spiritual teacher that had come from the East, and he was doing all these lectures and traveling all over the world and putting a lot of time in the West. And one thing he said repeatedly to his audience, what he always said was, "Please believe me when I tell you that you are not your body." And he would emphasize that and overemphasize that repeatedly, because so much of our identification and our anxiety comes from this bodily identification. And number one, this fear of death, that we identify with the body, therefore we have a fear of death. And I'm curious to know what you think. Why are we so afraid of death?
That's a great question. I think I think it has several answers. One of them, one safe one that comes to mind immediately, is because we are identifying with something which ontologically is not gonna last. It's temporary. We are identifying with castles of sand, hoping that they're never gonna melt into the sea.
Oh, I was just going to say, you're quoting Hendrix. Everybody go listen to Castles Made of Sand, please.
Oh, man, that song. Ooh.
Yes.
And so castles made of sand melts into the sea. Eventually.
What a great song, huh?
Yeah, coming from a guy like him, pretty wise.
So here are my thoughts on it. I think there's 2 points that tend to overshadow everything else, in the sense of why we are traditionally so afraid of death. Number one, a fear of the unknown, because people don't know what's beyond, quote, death, and what are we saying? Death of the body, right? And then number 2, fear of pain / suffering. So because we identify with the body, we identify with the pain and the suffering that exists within the material body. That's like, well, I don't want to die because it's going to hurt, right? You think, I'm going to get shot, I'm going to get cancer, I'm going to get run over by a train, whatever, right? There's this fear of the pain and the suffering that's going to be involved in the process of death. That's number 1. And number 2, that fear of the unknown. What is beyond this body? How could there be beyond?
Have you ever seen those researchers, those testimonies not so much about the paranormal, which I find is really, really interesting, like paranormal stuff, like children who claim to remember their past lives, for example, but people who have near-death experiences, and then there's a strong recurring motif about seeing, a tunnel with a white light, right? But you were just about to finish your point.
Well, yeah. So I think the concept of the unknown beyond death of the body comes from whether or not there's a concept for that particular individual on the spiritual path of reincarnation. Right?
Or of heaven also, right?
Right. Heaven, reincarnation, like where do you go when the body expires? And that's something that, okay, well, there's this concept that we call in the East transmigration of the soul. And so maybe we can do a podcast on that sometime, maybe reincarnation and transmigration of soul, what all that means, but to lightly touch on it, that takes us beyond, to quote Judas Priest, beyond the realms of death. Check out that song. It's very cool. Judas Priest, Beyond the Realms of Death. Awesome song. So that's something that I think people need to kind of wrap their heads around, and also wrap their heads around that the body you're in now is not the same body you had when you were born. It's not the same body you had when you were 5. And whatever age you are now, it's going to constantly change. I think they say the cells change in the body. We've talked about this before. Every 7 years, everything kind of grows and re-replicates itself. So, the body's changing, and there's that process of death from the time you were born. I know somebody had heavily criticized us for bringing this up before. It was really funny. I like when we get like the negative feedback from the podcast. How dare you say something like that? It was so depressing to hear that you're in the process of death. Like, well, guess what? You are. If you're going to be that ignorant to the process of death, then go be an ostrich and stick your head in the sand. But the fact of the matter is, you're born, you're in the process. What is aging? Aging is the process of dying. It's maturation, right? You mature, and then it starts to get old and weak and feeble, and it expires. It is what it is. You see it all around you. Yes, you see beautiful life around you, but part of that beautiful life is also the process of kind of death, for lack of a better term for right now, right? So why do we really need to be afraid of it? Or is there something greater, right? That spiritual path, we have to have an acceptance of something greater than ourselves. And there has to be something in spirituality. I don't care what flavor of religion you're in. Every religion, all spiritual paths say something very similar. There is something beyond the temporary. And everybody pretty much
except if you're a Zen Buddhist.
But everybody really kind of has this idea, right? Or most people, let's say most people, let's not go overly generalized, but let's generalize lightly. Let's do a light generalization. That this material world is temporary, right? Everything is changing. The process of entropy exists, and it's all around you at all times. So there's hints. The world, Mother Nature is always giving you hints of the process of death. It's called seasons. Southern California, we really don't have them. So maybe that's why Southern California people are a little bit more ignorant to certain things than others. But there's always that process, right? So we have to just kind of look at it and go, okay, well, what's beyond? What is beyond this temporary?
And then have some faith that there is something beyond temporary.
Yeah.
I began believing that I'm a soul, about 30 years ago, right? And I also started believing, and I still believe in what you mentioned, in transmigration, right? In transmigration of the soul. And I remember, I clearly remember the feeling I experienced, like psychologically, emotionally, when I basically told myself, okay, from now on, I'm going to try to live my life as much as possible as someone who identifies as a spiritual being inside a physical body. Okay, it's going to be hard. I mean, I'm still not there, way not there 30 years later, but at least I took on that challenge to just fully accept the paradigm, right? That I'm not my body, right?
Yeah.
And I remember, like, when I just at that moment, I sort of like decided, okay, this is what I'm going to start believing now. I felt a great sense of relief, like, oh my God, wow, I'm eternal. Like I'm eternal. I'm not going to get extinguished. I am not going to get extinguished. I'm not going to switch off for eternity in 30 or 50 or 70 or 80 years.
Yeah.
Right. We got to quote John Lennon here. Sorry. Not sorry. He was good in his own way. Right. Remember that song? 'Cause we all shine on.
The moon and the stars and the sun. Yeah.
Like the moon, like the stars and the sun.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh my God, I shine on. I live on. I'm eternal. Whoa, what a relief, from thinking, oh my God, I last 80 years to I last forever.
Yeah.
Imagine the difference in concept, right? That's how I felt. So, but we need faith. We need faith. And where do we find that faith? One place where we find faith in that premise, right? I mean, that teacher you spoke about, right? Who said, please believe me when I tell you that you're not, is that what he said, right?
Yeah.
Please believe me when I tell you that you're not your physical body. That's testimony right there of someone who has a lot of faith that we're not our bodies, right?
Yeah.
But for most of us, we're like, oh, maybe, And what do you think of, we mentioned this large body of literature or testimonies that have this recurring motif of, people who have out-of-body experiences or near-death experiences, and they often see a tunnel with some light, right? And there's also a large body of research on the sort of the paranormal type phenomena. And one of the ones I like the most is, children who claim to remember their past lives. Can we go there just a tiny bit? Because it really is, it's not so much substantiating, the point of transmigration, which it obviously does, but we could take it to substantiate the claim that we are eternal and that therefore we shouldn't be afraid of death.
It's kind
of
cool.
We should get Jim Tucker. Maybe we should leave it for another podcast.
Yeah.
We should really get Jim Tucker to, you know Jim Tucker, right?
Yeah. That would be cool. I think that would be
Jim Tucker is the
cool
guy from University of Virginia. You want to tell our listeners who Jim Tucker is? For those who
go
don't
ahead.
know?
You already started.
Okay, as a small parenthesis, Jim Tucker is a guy we want to come to get, we want to invite on our podcast. He's the guy who took over the work of the late Ian Stevenson, who was the head of the psychiatry department at the University of Virginia. And they started this sort of sub-department called the Department of the Division of Perceptual Studies. Maybe it has a different name now. And Jim Tucker took the torch basically and continues gathering. It's like a think tank or a hub where all sorts of testimonies and interviews and cases of children who claim to remember a past life are gathered and analyzed and verified if they can be verified at all. And to me, I mean, these are just that topic is so fascinating.
Yeah, it is. And, I've seen videos and little documentaries on that kind of stuff where kids are going, no, here's where I was killed. This is what happened. This person was my wife. This was their name. Stuff they could have never known. And we're talking about kids that were like 6, 7 years old, very small children that would have had no understanding and knowledge of any of this. And they had all this information. And it's quite rampant. So, yeah, I think it's cool.
Literally proving, I mean, if it's true, it proves that we survive the death of the physical body.
Yeah. And I think part of that, right, is understanding that, there's, like I said before, Mother Nature's always pointing in the direction of the truth. And you can look at your hand, you can look at your feet, you can look at, whatever part of your body. And, You can say, okay, I'm going to move my fingers and start wiggling your fingers, right? But those are all separate, attached entities, and realize, oh, okay, this is a part of me. It's an extension of me. But do you lose your identity if you lose a finger?
Right.
No, you don't. I know a guy, a grappler, very well known, kind of a buddy of mine, and he had a toe taken off. I don't know, it's probably 10 years ago now, or whatever. Didn't change him as a grappler, didn't change who he was. Didn't look at him and go, oh, it's not you anymore. Still the same guy. So we have to realize that who we are, our identity, has to go beyond the physical.
There's a few extreme cases of what you just spoke, where like someone is like either born with or has an accident and loses 90% of his freaking brain. Right? There's one case, I forgot the name, Doctor Who, but the whole front lobe, like the dude had no freaking front lobe of his brain and was still able to like speak. So it's kind of like that Monty Python movie. Remember, like you chop off an arm and he's like, you can't touch this. Like I can still fight you. Then he chops another arm. Like, so I'm still the same person. You chop the legs off. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And it comes back to that story of Socrates, the famous Socrates story where they're like, okay, just get out of town or we'll kill you. You'll have to drink the hemlock. And in those days, it was understood that, everyone left the city and no one drank the hemlock. It was just kind of like a thing you say. That's just the way of saying, look, get out, and they get out. But he was like, okay, bring it on. I'll drink the hemlock. And they were like, oh shit, no, you're supposed to leave. That's not part of the scenario. We don't want you to die. He's like, no, give me the hemlock. And he said, right, you can't touch me. Like, you're not going to be able, you can't touch me. That's someone who, is speaking from the platform of, hey, I'm a soul, dude. Like, you're going to kill my physical body, but I'm not this body. So, like, you can't touch me.
Mm-hmm. It's something from within. And I think this is a concept we need to embrace in order to go beyond that
how much
fear,
we need to embrace it. Totally.
We have to embrace this concept of our individual essence, what we are really made out of, right? Our soul, our personal, individual, true unit of consciousness is something that can never be burned. It can never be pierced with an arrow or a bullet. It can never be offended. It can never be crushed or destroyed. We have to embrace that topic and really embrace the concept, because it's actually rooted within so many traditions, within, and this is where we kind of go into the personal theistic traditions of the world. It's rooted that your individuality, who you are. Look, I'll even go to stretch it so far as, let's say you didn't believe that you were an individual and you're a part of some current, some kind of universal spiritual current, and that your individuality is an illusion. Let's pretend you're that.
Okay,
type
we're
of
going
person.
with the
Let's just pretend.
versus,
There's like total non-dual,
cool.
monistic style
non-dual
ideology. Well, guess what? You're still transcendent.
Yeah, you're still not your body, right?
Right? You're still not the body. That's the whole point I was making. Right?
Sorry. Yep.
You're still not the
your body.
And so none of us, let's say you're driving around a car and then some jalopy and you get rid of it and you get a new car. You're not crying. You're not having a funeral for that car just because you got rid of the jalopy. I'll make you a quick story. It's funny. So we had no money when I was growing up. We were very poor for a variety of reasons, but that's not the point. The point is my parents could never afford a new car. There was always these junker used cars. And one that they had, it was like a 1978 Ford Granada. It was like this silver car on the outside. It was peeling off with paint and rusted. And it was this ugly dark maroon leather on the inside. We were going to school, elementary school, and this car was so bad, so junky. Every time my mother made a left turn, it honked. And it wouldn't stop honking until it made a right turn. So the humiliation me and my brother had from the time she picked us up and dropped us off, typically it happened, only at certain times because, she would turn one way to get into the school. So it would be making a right turn. It wouldn't do it. And then as soon as she made a left turn, turning in, it would start honking and everybody would laugh. Ha ha ha, Bryan, to me and my brother, ha ha, your mom's here. Look at, and we were going to a school at the time where we had this jalopy car, this piece of crap car. And everybody else had Porsche, Mercedes, BMW. Everybody was well off. And then it was just these two poor kids, that didn't even have a dryer at home, that our clothes had to be hung outside the car, flapping dry as we're driving to school.
No
Yes,
way.
yes. So the point of this story is, so while everybody's laughing, going, this can't be true. Yes, it's 100% true. Is that none of us, when my parents were finally able to afford a car, and I think right after that, they finally were able to get enough money together to get a new car. Nobody cried because we got rid of that piece of crap car, Ford Granada, that always honked when you made a left turn. And then we finally got a new car, right? We were like, oh my God, there's this celebration. So we don't have to celebrate the demise of a body that is no longer functional.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of the story. I just wanted to bring some levity to the situation because, yes, it's kind of a dark topic. But how do we bring it to light where we don't have to have this fear, right? The whole concept of this episode today is overcoming the fear
how
of
to,
death,
right? Yeah, overcoming.
It's a how to. Like, where are we at here? Where are we going with this? Right? We have to understand and embrace we are not our bodies.
Well, we come back to the same thing, we often come back to the same sort of core solution, But before that, one analogy that comes from the East is maybe you've heard of it, the bird in the cage. The bird in the cage. You buy a cage. You buy a bird, and the bird's in the cage, and then you spend your whole time, your whole day,
and you never feed it. And
fixing
it dies.
up the cage, cleaning the cage, polishing the cage, and you forget to feed the freaking bird inside the cage.
Yeah.
Like you ignore the bird and you just feed the cage.
Mm-hmm.
Feed the cage, clean the cage.
Yeah.
And then what happens? The bird dies.
Yeah.
Because you neglect it. So how do we protect ourselves from neglecting ourselves in a way? How do we protect ourselves from focusing on, like your analogy of the car, which we're not. We're the driver inside the car.
Yeah.
Or the cage, when we're not really a cage, we're the bird. Right? And I think one of the core ways to do it, this is like, how do you? Well, you should really, spend quality time every day. And here we go, praying or meditating or reading sacred scripture or listening to the Shaping Spirit podcast or others, just time with the divine, one-on-one, where you're just really praying, absorbing, connecting, entering into a state of spiritual yoga with the divine. And when you do that, then it's like when you do that, it's like you're pouring water on the very root of the tree from which you come from, right? And in that sense, you're nourishing yourself, right?
Yeah.
And the more you nourish yourself spiritually, the more you identify as a spiritual being,
Yeah.
and in a completely proportionate way, you disidentify from the physical body.
Yeah. And it's not,
right? So
I like those points that you're making. And one thing I want to make clear, it's not that we are saying to have some kind of dissociative disorder, right? Where you're not present and you're not using your vehicle for something good, right?
And then you also start not being affectionate to your children, for example.
Yeah. The body is a tool. It's a vehicle. Everything around you should be used in this service of spiritual service, of spiritual growth, spiritual development, helping others, right? So using these things as tools, right? Everybody has a toolbox at home, hammer, some kind of wedge, level, screwdrivers, nails, right? All these things we have, a drill. So you know what's in your toolbox. You pull out the tools when needed for the whatever project you have at home. Similarly, we have tools all around us. The first one, our primary tool, is our physical body.
We have?
Yeah.
What'd you say?
I said we have physical tools all around us, right? Everything in the world can be used in service, in some type of spiritual service. And that which cannot be favorable for spiritual service, that's what we can reject and put to the side. That which is available for spiritual service and can actually enhance spiritual service, this is what we should embrace and grow with.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. And that will get us to the mindset, what you're talking about, is having that spiritual mindset. We're like, yes, okay. We know that within the material world, there's suffering. Within the material world, there's going to be pain, anxiety, suffering, because there's attachment. And we're engaging ourselves within the four walls, so to speak, of material nature. So expect suffering, attachment, and this and that. You can also expect joy and happiness as well. But all of it is temporary. And one time I read this quote, said, happiness is just a temporary cessation of material suffering. I wouldn't personally go that far. I do think there's a spectrum, right? I think you can be flat and just be kind of in a sense of calm. And that's an absence of material suffering. And then there's clearly sensations of joy and happiness and elation. But ultimately, how we identify with the body and how we cling to this particular body, I think can be detrimental to our mindset of overcoming the fear of death. I really do.
Good point. Good point. So let us stay strong in that conviction and do whatever we need to do to keep that faith strong, and let us continue to act as much as possible in the capacity of souls, or as in the capacity of spiritual beings residing in a physical body. And if we continue doing that, then we can be sure that we'll actually give the best of ourselves. Remember that Foo Fighters song?
Yeah.
Is someone getting the best, the best,
of you.
the best,
Yeah.
the best of you? So we want to give the best of ourselves to
Listen
others.
to Dave Grohl and the Food Fighters.
The best of ourselves is
Yeah.
ourselves as souls, and so when we reconnect with the divine, then we can really give the best of ourselves to others.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well,
Love
thank
it.
you for listening. And you can keep the questions and the comments coming at shaping spirit podcast at gmail.com. That's shaping spirit podcast at gmail.com. And remember, we are not our bodies. We are spiritual beings. We are not matter, but we matter.
We matter. We all matter. So remember that when you look at somebody else, even if you disagree with them, even if you don't like them, everybody has their place in the world. And everybody matters. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.